All right, class. This is the lecture for Batman Killing Joke, which is a very short comic, and I included it on the list because it changed comics forever when it came out. Also, believe that I posted, to our class this information, an article, an interview with Alan Moore, in an article about this that was in the Guardian. And what you need to know about this comic was, won the Eisner Award in '89, but I wanted to point this out. It's considered the greatest Batman story ever told. Now, I'm not 100% sure about that, but it did change comics forever. This is also an important comic because Alan Moore is one of the most influential comic book artist writers ever. And he has changed the face of comic books multiple times in multiple ways. And this is a comic book that he ultimately regretted. He's had a lot of problems with DC and DC's executives, and you'll see in this article that I posted that he regretted this comic book because, well, one of the things he was trying to do with this comic book is he was trying to really dive into the psychology of characters, both good and bad. The good guys and the bad guys, and to make characters more complex. He does a better job of that in the other comics we're going to look at, like V for Vendetta and Watchmen, where you can't tell, like, are these guys good guys, bad guys? I don't know, because people aren't really, that simple. And comic books have kind of made things that simple for so long. And if any of you guys, read or, hopefully read, but if you watch Game of Thrones, you know that there's no, like, pure good guy or bad guy. It's always a complex mixture of things. And I think a lot of those kind of ideas and stuff, in comics, Alan Moore made popular. This thing's only 46 pages long, but he regretted it because he felt what he wanted to do, according to this interview, was he wanted to inspire comic book writers to break out of the simple superhero, superheroine, not super heroine, but, female hero, heroine. He wanted them to break out of the mold and do new and creative and inspirational things that comic book readers had never seen before. And he was kind of disappointed because instead of doing things new and doing new innovative things, they just kind of copied him and didn't do anything new at all. And unfortunately, because this comic book is so sexualized and is so violent, and Barbara Gordon is so brutalized and kind of tortured and objectified, and she's paralyzed, and then she's photographed naked after being shot in the spine, and there's a question of whether or not she's raped, and unfortunately that kind of violence towards women, comic book artists kind of they took it and they ran with it, and he was wanting people to do new and creative things, and instead they just copied them. So he's really disappointed, and he was really regrets this comic book. In fact, it became so influential, the idea of taking a female character in the story, and killing her to move the plot forward, that it shows up in Green Lantern when Green Lantern's female love interest is killed and shoved into a refrigerator, that a female comic book artist named Gail Simone coined the term fridging, which is to kill a female character in a movie or comic book in order to progress the plot, which is what Deadpool 2 got criticized for, and Ryan Reynolds said that he regretted it, but it's okay because they're going to use a time machine to bring her back, as you know, at the end of the movie. Retroactive spoiler alert. Oops, too bad. It's been out for a year, too bad. So Moore disowned the comic, and just to give you an idea of how crappy DC is, when Moore asked the DC editors, specifically Len Wein, "Are you okay with what happens to Barbara Gordon?" he responded, and I quote, "Yeah, okay, cripple the bitch." So you can kind of see where DC's head's at, and Moore and DC have had it out, and they don't treat their employees very well. I don't know if you're aware of this, but during the 90s, when I was in high school and was kind of at the end of collecting comics, because I discovered this thing called Women. There was a big breakaway. All the writers an artist from DC and Marvel left, and it almost destroyed DC and Marvel, and they formed like Image and all these other comic books. But anyways, basically, one of the things, the most interesting thing about this comic is it opens up a huge question. I mean, it's an origin story for the Joker, but you can't trust it. But as you read this comic, what I want you to look for is really pay attention to the opening monologue that Batman is giving to who he thinks is the Joker. Joker's already escaped, and Batman's basically breaking it down like, look, we got to figure this out. I came to you because I want to give you this one last chance to make amends. I'll help you get treatment. Let's try to make you better. But if we keep at this, either I'm going to kill you, you're going to kill me, or we're going to kill each other. And it's this big opening monologue. It's big and dramatic. And all of a sudden, Batman realizes that's not the Joker. But it sets the stage for the whole comic book, because at the end of the comic, the Joker and Batman are, confronted. Batman is furious with the Joker for what he did to Barbara Gordon. And the Joker tells a joke, and it goes like this. Or I don't know if you call it a joke, but whatever. He says this. He says, essentially, there are two guys, and they escape from the lunatic asylum. And they're both lunatics, which the Batman and Joker are both crazy. Even though, Batman's a good guy. He's nuts. This whole Batman thing, it's not normal psychology. But the two guys escape from the lunatic asylum, and one guy, they got to jump over like a gap between two buildings to get away. And the second guy doesn't want to jump. And the first guy says, hey, no big deal. I'll shine my flashlight across the gap between the buildings, and you walk over on the beam. And the second guy says, no, because what happens if you shut the flashlight off when I'm halfway across? I'll fall and die. And it's supposed to be funny, but it characterizes what's going on with these two guys, because one, neither one of them seem to recognize the idea that the flashlight beam won't support either one of them. They'll fall and die, and that's supposed to be a metaphor for what they're doing. This whole supervillain superhero thing is complete lunacy anyways. It will lead to death, but none of them recognize that. They're more concerned with the trust relationship between either one. So at the end of the comic, if you'll notice, the Batman has his hands around the Joker's throat, and the Joker's hand is reaching towards the comic, towards the Batman. So there's a question in the comic of what happens. Does the Joker kill the Batman, with whatever he's doing with his hand? Does the Batman choke the Joker to death? Do they kill each other? Or does Batman, repeat the same pattern, which is arresting, the Joker and, bringing him to justice, which is the least likely scenario given the opening monologue and the joke and what the Batman's saying and the intensity of what the Joker's done to Barbara Gordon, paralyzing her, and so the main question is, does the Batman kill the Joker? Does the Joker kill the Batman? Or do they kill each other? And that's what that ultimate joke has to deal with. And so this is a psychological thriller. Now, there's art and things to analyze, of course, during the whole thing. I mean, you'll notice as the Joker tells his background story, you'll notice it's kind of in black and white, and usually there's a few things in color, like the fly traps and the prawns or the shrimp that they're eating. And it's funny, the things that are in color are used, and the Joker himself, because he wears the red hat costume like another villain, as a disguise. But the Joker is being predated upon by the mafia guys who are tricking him into this heist. So there's the whole predator-prey aspect that runs throughout the comic. Barbara Gordon's also redheaded. So, there's that red color that's associated with things that are preyed upon. We get a fly trap with flies. I already said that, but you get my point. We also don't know whether or not we can trust the Joker's origin story, because, he's telling the story, and, it's hard to trust the whole comic in general, because the very same gun that he shoots Barbara Gordon with when he goes to shoot Batman at the end a flag comes out that says bang, and it's the exact same gun. So we don't even know if we can trust this story, if we can trust the Joker and his background story. There's also other red things that are associated with Joker's background story, like when it shows him at the funeral. The fun park, whatever, the Six Flags type thing. He's on a throne on a mountain of baby doll corpses or whatever. And that kind of goes back to his story about how he lost his wife and child. So there's a lot of color and artistic symbolism in there as well to analyze, but the main thing is this psychological aspect of Batman Killing Joke. And notice the title is Killing Joke, so it tells you that joke in the end is central to this comic book and what it means. But this comic really influenced comic books. It really made people start to go into the psychology of heroes and villains. It started a trend, unfortunately, of sexualized violence towards women, and Moore regretted it. He really regretted it, and I think he does a better job, as you'll see in V for Vendetta and Watchmen, of going into the psychology of characters and showing their complexity, without fridging women, without using their deaths to put forth a plot. And I think the fact that he does regret it and sees what it did to comic books and the kind of things that it started shows his character. He admits it was a mistake. He owns up to it, and in future comic books, he really puts forth ideas of feminism, as you'll see in V for Vendetta and The Watchmen, and especially Swamp Thing. Thank you.